And ultimately, he got everyone on board for this Constitution that was ultimately signed. And it is said, he is quoted during this time of trying to tell people to rally to the common cause. We must all hang together, or we shall meet, or we shall most assuredly hang separately. Everyone, we got to band together here. And they did.
You got to finish it.
So that was a little bit of magic. One little last thing that was left in the genie bottle, and we're all better for it.
Right. Welcome to the Republic Podcast, where history meets scrutiny and facts matter. Join Rob and Lou as they dive deep into the foundations of American democracy, dissect the laws that shape our lives, and challenge the narratives behind today's headlines. From forgotten chapters in the U.S. history to the legal truths they didn't teach you in school. This is your front row seat to get informed, unapologetic conversation. We have an American republic, if we can keep it. Now, let's get started. And we are back.
Back again.
Back in the saddle again. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else joining us out there. This is the Republic, If You Can Keep It podcast.
If you can keep it.
I'm Lou.
And I'm Rob.
And welcome to our journey this week with us. So, Rob, who are we going to be covering this week? We've been covering the top founding fathers. We are at number 4. We're at number 5.
We're at number 5. And thank you, everyone who's been watching, liking, subscribing. Please continue to hit that like button, share it, love it, live it, learn it. We've also done our monthly dockets and all sorts of stuff, but we have right in the middle of our top 10 founding fathers list. And here, we're right in the middle with number 5. We're doing Benjamin Franklin.
More than just a man on the C note that all dancers love. More than the man of electricity. He is one of our top.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
So anyway, Benjamin Franklin, you know, the one thing that we have to say is that unlike, some of the other founding fathers, he wasn't a war hero. He wasn't, he was a great statesman, but he's one of the probably the most unique founding fathers. I know I've said it before, where the founding fathers of America are truly basically Renaissance men, where they were so good at everything. But he is literally the epitome of this. No formal education, yet was one of the most intelligent and most well-rounded and balanced founding fathers that I think there is.
Yeah. And, in contrast to someone like George Washington, for example, who was Johnny on the spot, doing this, doing that, doing the troops, doing this, being president, all sorts of action. Even John Adams, always in the background doing this and this, all sorts of stuff. Lou and I were talking before we got on stage. Benjamin Franklin, he's like the slow roll, baby. He's slow roll. He just makes it sweet, fine, and consistent. And by the time the revolution really was kicking off, he was what? Let's see.
Late 60s, early 70s.
Just under 70 years old.
Right.
So he was long in the tooth. And for that time, the life expectancy was like late 60s, early 70s. So, people was like, well, what are you going to do, old man? Well, let me tell you what the man old did.
Right.
So let's kick it off. Here's a guy who was born in 1706. He is the 15th of 17 kids.
Just imagine that nowadays.
I felt horrible for his mother, but then it's bad enough, but evidently roughly half those kids were with his father's first wife, I guess, who passed, and he was sired with the second wife, but still 17 kids. He was born in Boston. Everyone always thinks of him as only in Philadelphia, but he's spent up until about age 16, 17. He was in Boston. Um, he went to school and really soaked up all of the education he could. Of course, his dad thought he was going to be a reverend, in the church. That didn't pan out. And here's a kid who is soaking up all the knowledge he possibly can. His dad had him taken out of school, and you're going to help me in my business. He was a candle maker. So he learned the business of that. And his stepbrother or half brother, I don't know exactly how you put it, one of the older ones had started doing his own printing. So at the age of 16, here's Ben going to work as a journalist slash in the printing press business. And he does that at age 16. And quite frankly, he was really good at it, both with his writing, his intellect.
You mean quite Franklin,
Well done. Well done. And he goes to his brothers when he's 16 years old, or they're about 17 years old, to Philadelphia. He just leaves Boston and goes down there. Again, we've talked about this before with other people and the other founding fathers. I know it's a different time. I know it's amazing to me. All, or at least so many of these figures, they're 12 years old, 15 years old, they're leaving to go on, board ships and do this and come back here, be persons of industry. Alexander Hamilton was running an import-export business at the age of 15.
George Washington at the age of 10, taking care of his entire plantation,
So here's Benjamin, and he's really into all of this printing, and it catches the eye of the then governor of Pennsylvania, who is Sir William Keith. And William Keith says, you should start your own business. I'll fund you. Go to England and I'll write a letter of credit for you. He's 17 going on 18 years old, goes to England to do this stuff. Letter of credit everly around. So what does he do? Well, I got stiffed by the governor of Pennsylvania. He just gets another printing job in London just because he can, and he's ambitious. And he comes back to Philadelphia in 1726, and he starts making Philadelphia his home. Now, when I say making Philadelphia his home, he's already in the printing business back in Philadelphia. He's making pretty good coin for the time frame. And he becomes a community organizer. He becomes a community man. He established the first circulating library in Philadelphia, 1731. 1732, he started publishing his Poor Richard Almanacs that would come out every year. Did that for 25 years.
Yep.
And evidently made a serious fortune on those. So now he's got money. He taught himself 3 different languages, Spanish, French, and Latin. And then he goes from there, he is appointed postmaster and he does some other stuff. But ultimately, he starts making things for Philadelphia. He starts creating things. He starts using his head for the betterment of his fellow man. 1736, he goes into the General Assembly as their clerk. 1737, he's appointed postmaster of Philadelphia. He, in 1749, starts what turns out to be the University of Pennsylvania, the Ivy League school in Philadelphia, which is chartered in 1753. All these things, from he started a militia force to protect the Philadelphia area. He created a means by which to pave the city streets. He improved the method of street lighting. And he assisted in founding this first city hospital. I think it was the first city hospital. If not the first, it was one of the first in 1751.
First in the colonies.
Right. So he really was the man of Philadelphia. He was giving back to the community. He wasn't even involved in politics at this point, not until 1751. And at that point, he became a member of the General Assembly in Pennsylvania.
Right. And I mean, and just at, I mean, some of the other things that he's also done. I mean, as Rob mentioned, the list is huge at this point. The one thing that he mentioned was Poor Richard's Almanac. If anyone hasn't read that, that is something that is, I mean, actually still hilarious with some of the writings that he did, and that it was very insightful, not insightful, but insightful. Uh, and very educational, that people actually began reading it on a regular basis, and it started setting forth, some of the foundations of writings that would later come on from other founding fathers. That the one thing that he did, which I'm upset, is that I didn't have it out here, is he actually is the one that first came up with the join or die uh, pennant, which was one of the original colonies calls for action. That some of the other things that he did, which talked about before, everybody hears. What did Benjamin Franklin do? What's the first thing that comes to mind besides a $100 bill? Is he created electricity? Well, he didn't create electricity, but he was a very fascinating scientist, where again, with no formal education, this is all taught on his own, as some of his writings even say, by trial and error, where there was a few different occasions where he almost electrocuted himself and his son while experimenting with electricity. But he determined, and he was the first one that found that lightning was based on electricity. And because of that, he looked into it further and started doing some of the things where he ended up coming up with naming the various elements of electricity, the positive, negative charges that he showed charge conservation, which is now the precursor to the batteries. The lightning rod, which is now was used around the world. Some of the things that he also did was that he was just that he kept looking and searching for different things, and that he invented. I mean, some of the things that going down a quick list again, because there's so much talking about these. He created bifocal glasses.
Yes, he did.
That he also created for everybody that wears a watch and keeps their steps. He created the first odometer to keep the number of steps and the distance traveled while he was running his postal route. That nurses out there, you're all going to hate this. Urinary catheter. Welcome, Ben Franklin, for creating a urinary catheter. He charted the Gulf Stream to improve transatlantic travel. That he created the long arm for retrieving books. So all the grandparents are up there now using that thing to get their cans and everything off the top shelves. Thank Benjamin Franklin. That he ended up, even though with no formal education, ended up getting honorary degrees from Harvard, Yale, Oxford, and a fellowship in the Royal Society. Now, these are things that people nowadays aspire to, and he achieved them, again, with no formal education. All these things that he did just by being curious, as was it Ted Lasso? Don't be judgmental, be curious. Well, that's what it was. So anyway,
So you got to get a Ted Lasso residence in there. That a reference, and that's great. Here's a guy, and I can't take credit for it. I think it was, and I was telling Lou off camera, there was a Benjamin Franklin piece that was done, I think, for Prager University. I think it was Dinesh D'Souza who was narrating it. But what I remember of that in particular was that they made the point that Benjamin Franklin stood for what, at least in retrospect, he was the guy that Americans started to be once we broke free. We were the ones who were curious. We were the ones who would take the bull by the horns and, well, I don't understand that. Let's figure it out. Let's do it. Let's do this. Let's try that. Let's do this. Here's a guy who did everything from creating a different kind of stove to dealing with streetlights to bifocals to catheters to, I mean, he was curious, and he would try to invent everything. Not only that, but he understood the printing world. He understood the mechanics of, he did all the stuff with candle making. He did all the stuff with his hands. And everyone thinks of, well, I shouldn't say that. I think the first gist, or the people think of Benjamin Franklin as this very suave, sophisticated guy who's the ambassador, who likes, who's talk and learned. He barely got into high school before he had to stop. And here's a guy who worked with his hands and worked with his brain, and he didn't let anything get in his way, and became absolutely ultra successful.
Here's one other interesting fact. Benjamin Franklin actually suggested the first bird of the United States. You know what we almost
Turkey.
had? The
A
turkey.
turkey.
So could you imagine that instead of the majestic eagle, we get the turkey?
Yeah,
Anyway.
not everyone's perfect. No offense, Ben, but seriously, freaking turkey,
Right.
whatever.
So
The second part of his career really kicked off in the 1750s. Now he's at this point started close to be 50 years old. You're long in the tooth for back then in the 18th century. And as a member of the General Assembly, there was an issue with taxation and the governors and blah, and who to do what. At that time, before the revolution, most of the states, and I think Connecticut was one of the only ones that actually had an elected governor. The vast majority of the governors were appointed by King in England, because we were a royal territory, and the different colonies had assigned to them royal governors. So when there was an issue that cropped up where there was this issue with taxation and the governor and the blah, 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 they had to send an ambassador over, or at least a committee over to England, to have this heard by the court in England, whether it's actually the king or his advisors hear it and then talk to the king and they get back, whatever. Benjamin Franklin was pointed, tapped on the shoulder. Hey, we need you to represent these interests in Pennsylvania. Go to England. And this was his first ambassador type role, where he went to England in 1753, I believe. And he goes, 1757. I'm sorry, I'm looking down at my notes. And he goes and meets with King George III's, his inner sanctum, and makes the argument. But while he's there, he meets and makes connections with a whole host of people, which is going to help him and us and the soon to be United States, with all of these connections he's going to make. And his success for his first foreign mission was immense. And during this year, he was successful in getting whatever he needed to do. I'm not going to get into it with regard to his Pennsylvania tie done. And he returned back to America in 1762. But then again, he goes back to England in 1764 because, again, there was another issue with regard to taxation and other things with the government of Pennsylvania. So the assembly in Pennsylvania sent him back to be its special agent. And while he's there, there's a whole set of taxation laws that are going to come into play. In particular, the Stamp Act in 1765. And Benjamin Franklin, while he's there, is asked to basically pipe up, like, what do you think about this? And he really, in his own suave and sophisticated way, made the point for the soon to be United States that, no, we understand the reason you're asking, because the crown and its coffers have been drained from the French and Indian War. But here we are, we're on the outpost. We're trying to defend ourselves. We're always reliant on the crown. We can't be saddled with all these burdens, and you can't tax us without representation. he impressed the Stamp Act went through over his objection. Not that he really had any say so, but he was consulted about it. But all these horrible things came to pass where no one thought that the colonists were going to really start revolting about it, but they really made a huge stink. And, here's Franklin saying, back in England, saying, kind of told you so. And ultimately, the Stamp Act was rescinded. Huge feather in the cap for Franklin. Well, that was great, but King George III said, well, if I'm not going to do the Stamp Act, we're going to put in some other acts too. So they sent him a whole bunch of other taxation acts, which of course continued to be problematic for the colonists.
T-tax and everything.
And while he's there, he tries to explain he's trying to keep the colonists attached to the crown. He's not a revolutionary at this time. He's trying to be peacemaker. He's saying, look, I'm just giving you my thoughts about this. You're not going to make any friends here. And you want to be able to mend fences before it's too late. And all of these things that you're doing, you're just throwing gas on the fire that's already starting to build.
And one of the things that, unlike some of the other people that have been over there, that have been sent over there as politicians, that Franklin was a celebrity over there. I mean, that by that they didn't just see him as a talking head, a politician coming over there to argue certain things. They saw him that his writings, his wit, and his status as an actual scientist during that period of time, and the things that he had accomplished at that point really set him above and beyond most other people that came over there. So the British and even French aristocracy really held him in high esteem, more so than anyone else, because they saw him again as a Renaissance man, as a well-founded person who took things very seriously and approached them from a very pragmatic view. And so that's why when he says things that they did carry a more weight, and that's why he comes, as we'll talk about later on, he becomes our ambassador to France. He has a significant role in not only starting America, but continuing and making sure America continues to prosper.
Right. And at this time, before Lexington and Concord, there was a notation that I thought was really quite interesting, and it seemed to wrap things up. Here he is trying to mend fences, wanting to be pro-colonist, but he's also loyalist to the crown. And he was accused, as it said, he was accused in America of being too much of an Englishman, and in England, he was accused of too much being a colonist. So he was trying to ride that little narrow rail.
And if everybody hates you, you must be doing something right. Right.
So he's in England. He stays there until there's an issue that comes up with some private letters that he had promised would never be published, but then he sends them off to America, pretty well knowing they're going to be published. And sure enough, they were. And they basically say, well, you can't stay here in England anymore. You've tarnished your name and all this other stuff. And he was convinced that his usefulness anyway in England was done by that time. This is 1775. So Arthur Lee comes over and takes over his position, Franklin's position, as being a pseudo ambassador, at least an agent for the colonies. And in March of 1775, Franklin returns or sets sail back to the colonies. And he comes back pretty much right after the time of Lexington and Concord. And he hears about Lexington and Concord and says, oh.
Yep. Changes everything.
He was no longer in the thought process of being a peacemaker. He had given his best efforts to try to tell them no. But when push came to shove, he was ardently on pro-colonial side. He said, you FAFO'd, and guess what? Now I'm done. We're over here. And we're over here. We're ready for you. And we're going to fight this. So in May This is right after he gets off the boat, pretty much on his voyage back to Philadelphia. He's elected to the Philadelphia Assembly and elected to be a delegate to the Second Continental Second Continental Congress. Which is crazy. Like, you just get off the boat and also, hey, you Ben, come here. We got a job for you.
Yeah. But wait, there's even more. So what else happens
So
once you
he not only at that time is in the Continental Congress, he is put in the Committee of Five to basically draft and ratify the Declaration of Independence. He didn't have much to do with it, admittedly, but he was among the five on that committee. And
I think one of the most important things, though, that he did, I mean, although he was part of one of the five, the one significant thing that he did is that he changed one of the lines that Jefferson had written, where the first line that Jefferson had written in the for the Declaration of Independence was, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable." And Benjamin, in his astute knowledge, he's like, "Yeah, no, let's make it a little bit more engaging. We need something a little bit more." And so he said, so he's the one that convinced Jefferson to, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." And that's where we are right now. So
he's the man. And even though he had spent, 7 years or whatever it was in England, overseas, away from his family, etc., in September of 1776, he was chosen to be commissioner to France. So guess what? Pack your bags again. You're gonna join Arthur Lee, who was already over there, and Silas Deane, and you're going to try to help get us some money. Get us some
all
money,
about the
baby.
Benjamins. It's all about the Benjamins.
All about the Benjamins. Now, one thing that I read, I thought was really kind of interesting. Here's a guy who's got a lot of money that he's made being a printer, among all these other things. Before he goes over to France, he comes up with like 3,000 to 4,000 pounds, because that's what the currency we were using, and gives it to the Continental Congress. Where Continental Congress didn't have jack. And they, we've talked about it with Washington. Here he is out there trying to fight a revolution. His troops they don't have shoes on their feet. Their uniforms, if they had any, are all tattered and torn and rags. We need money for ammunition. We don't have any. And he kept asking for money and money and money. Here's Benjamin saying, you know what? I'm giving you what I have. I'm doing my part. And off to France he goes, because France hates England.
Yeah.
And, we're trying to get some money, and we know that if we can convince France, look, if you help us take out England here, it's in your interest too. Help me, help you, help me.
Help me.
And he arrives in France in December, and he becomes a member of Parisian society. And as Lou said, everyone's fawning over him. Oh, he's this, he's gracious, he's going to these salons, he's doing whatever, but all the time he's working the back channels, and he's putting pressure on, to the extent you can put pressure on, the King of France, and saying, come on, we need this help, we need this help. It was the slow, steady drip. And he was consistent about it, and he was determined. But for his efforts, along with a few others in France along the way, I mean, we talked about John Adams doing some of this stuff, but the large majority of the French contributions was due to Benjamin Franklin. And without those contributions, we weren't going anywhere. Right. We would start the fracas, but the revolution would come to a quick halt.
Right. I mean, he was instrumental, where, one of the things that he did, 1778, was where he pushed along and got France to sign the Treaty of Allegiance with the United States. That's, I mean, That's something where that change huge, where at this point, yes, the revolution was already underway, that we were already, 2 years into it. It still wasn't a guaranteed thing, and that it was only because of his continuing push that the money came in, as Rob said, to be able to keep funding the army, the what we had as a navy back then, and to keep the movement going.
So imagine you're Benjamin Franklin in France trying to tell the king of France, like, you need give us some money, like millions of pounds or francs or whatever, please. We want gold, silver, what they call it, specie, just give it to us. And he's like, really? Why would I do that? What's the likelihood that you ragtag, rebels are going to do anything? And then, as Lou said, news gets to France in February 1778 that General Burgoyne and his army have been cornered, beaten, and they surrender. That gets the ears perked up on the French side of things, like, holy crap.
This is real. This is a
Imagine what would
reality.
happen if we actually funded some of this stuff and actually helped them a little bit. Now, up until this time, no one, even the French, wouldn't consider the Americans. They wouldn't consider the colonists a country, because to do that, you're risking open war with Britain, who will then come after you, and Britain would never do it. But once this comes and the Treaty of Alliance was signed, that was huge, because it's the first time anyone formally acknowledged the colonies as being its own independent state or
The
union.
Declaration of Independence actually meant something at that point.
Right. So France starts funding our stuff. And on October 28th of 1778, Benjamin Franklin, the U.S. Commission, was discharged, and Franklin was appointed to be the sole, I got to get this wrong, the plenipotentiary. Wow, I did it.
Say
The
that again.
plenipotentiary to the French court. So he was the man. And before there was a group of three, Silas Deane, then General Lee, and Benjamin Franklin. No. The commission was dissolved, but you, Benjamin, you stay there because you're the guy, you're the rock star. And he stayed on for a couple more years, saw through the war. And it largely because of Franklin's appeals, of his efforts, of everything he did. It's estimated that by the monetary gifts, loans, donations, however you want to call it, the French would call it, they were all loans, they should be repaid. All the money that was sent to the colonies, and this is in 1770s, 1780s. So I don't know what the translation of this number to today's, but it was
A lot of money.
It's estimated at $60 million in today's money, I think. It's just huge. So with the financial backing of France, with their navy being pledged to come and assist with breaking up the British blockades and the British domination of the eastern seaboard, most notably during the Battle of Yorktown, Britain is defeated. And, that's great, but we have to actually come to a peace treaty. Now, who's going to do that? Well,
Yeah. Who's been there before?
Let's talk about our slow roll man. He's just keep doing it nice and slow, and he's just steady, and here he is.
Come in, they be hating.
That's right, he's leaning back.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's a guy who now it's 1782, and he's what, 76 years old? So he, along with John Adams, John Jay, and Thomas Jefferson, and I think Henry Lawrence, they all meet and work out the treaty that was signed in November of 1782, and it recognized American independence, which was not always a given. Even during the peace treaty, England was going to say, "Oh, we'll call it like we call it a draw." Like you can put your
Yeah.
arms off,
Yeah.
but they didn't want to give the acknowledgement that the
They've
colonists
been
were
beaten.
independent. But
Right.
after much negotiations, again, thank you, Benjamin, it's in the treaty. And the American independence was granted. Treaty of Paris was signed ultimately in 1783. So, what's a man to do?
But wait, there's still more. So once he gets home, he ends up coming home and ends up serving as a president of Pennsylvania's Executive Council. And there, that he was the oldest delegate that was sent to the Constitutional Convention in 1787. And from there, one of the things that he was doing is urging Pennsylvania to sign on to the Constitution and saying, "Look, yes, this isn't perfect, but we really need it." And what was one of the biggest phrases before you pour that drink? What was one of the biggest phrases that Benjamin Franklin came up with, of which we owe this podcast? When asked if you what we would have, his statement was to a woman that asked him, "Ma'am, is a republic if you can keep it."
If you can keep it.
And by
Now,
that he meant, yes,
we've talked about this over the podcast episodes about the Constitutional Convention, about the need for compromise, about how those 6 months in Philadelphia in the summer heat, there were contentious arguments over and over and over and over again. From all accounts, there was a time where they were going to give up. Like, this is ridiculous. This is all ridiculous. We finally got rid of the crown. We can't even screw this. We're not a union. We're just going to have 13 different countries. Screw you. Screw this. Screw that. Who comes to the forefront? Here's the old guy in the room. Slow roller, Benjamin Franklin. And from the accounts, he's the one who got everyone on board to say, look, y'all did a great thing. We've all done great things here. We're not done yet. And it would be an insult to everyone who paid the ultimate price, all the sacrifices that have been made. And ultimately, he got everyone on board for this Constitution that was ultimately signed. He is the only one who has signed the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Treaty of Paris, the three documents which delineated American independence. And it is said, he is quoted during this time of trying to tell people to rally to the common cause. We must all hang together, or we shall meet, or we shall most assuredly hang separately. Now, that I believe was said during the time with the Declaration of Independence, but I'm sure some version of that was also talked about at the Constitutional Convention. Like, everyone, we got to band together here, and they did.
You got to finish it. Right.
So that was a little bit of magic, one little last thing that was left in the genie bottle, and we're all better for it.
Right. And one of the big things that of course, at the time, that with slavery and everything else, one of the big things about Benjamin Franklin is that early on, that during when he was publishing his papers, that he would actually run ads for purchased slaves and actually run advertisements for it. That before the time of his death, it was actually around 1780, upon returning to the States, he became a staunch abolitionist, to the point where he actually became the president and founded the Pennsylvania Abolition Society and petitioned the first Congress back in 1790, which was his last public act, to end slavery and the slave trade. So this is something where, beyond going for just taking care of America, he wanted to also address some of the things that he saw wrong with America. And that was one of them.
It's kind of like George Washington in a way. We talked about George when his father died, he's 11 years old, and he inherits slaves. Everyone around, in the Virginia area who had any sort of land had slaves. And that was, as horrible as it sounded, it was a social norm. It was accepted. And over time, Washington really took to heart the thoughts from the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. He really struggled with it, but he was man enough to actually take a step back and challenge his own beliefs and say, well, maybe what my dad had handed down to me was wrong. And he ultimately, in his will, freed all of his slaves. And, Franklin at one point had 2 slaves, which were personal servants. And he really did the same kind of wrestling. He must have really been thinking about the same thing, reading the Declaration of Independence, going through all the things, talking about how we needed to be free from the tyranny that the crown was imposing. And why was this any different? Why, if that's the case, then why should I be owning another human being? And he, as Lou said, really turned the corner and really became a firm and staunch abolitionist at the time of his death. So for all these reasons,
right, he
slow
is
rolling, easy going, Benjamin
all
Franklin.
about the Benjamin Franklin. You may be on the 100, but you're number 5.
There he is, number 5 on our list.
Yeah. And just to circle back for a second, as Rob said, that, we've talked a lot in a lot of our other episodes about different things. For anyone that's interested in a lot of the things where we've discussed, as we've discussed about Washington and Franklin here, about things that they saw that were wrong, but they had to address as part of the country. Anyone that's interested in our further discussion, we did a really great podcast episode on it. I believe it was episode number 19 or 20, around there, on the various compromises, constitutional compromises, where it was things that we as a country weren't proud of, but that the founding fathers recognized we needed to do to keep our country together. If anybody's interested in that, we have that. It'll be in the links in the descriptions, as well as in the comments. For anybody that wants to see anything else, we're going to have all of Ben Franklin's writings, all of his achievements, everything else inside our community post, because it's too difficult to put everything inside one of the comments and inside the descriptions. But we're going to, as we promise always, we document everything and we'll give you all the links, so you don't have to listen to us. You can make your own decisions. But
I love it.
We also thank you for your support. That we are now on, I think this is actually episode 25 of our regular podcasts, that we've had our 2 monthly dockets. If anyone hasn't seen it for April yet, go check it out. Or for now, May or June, or or whenever. We also have our special reports. We have everything that we have here. We break it down into small, digestible segments under our Constitution 101, discussing the issues, where you don't want to listen to the whole podcast of that. Lou really drones on forever. We digest it down to 5 to 7 minutes of intelligence. But watch the podcast, because this is where you get to see us in action.
That's right. And go to the YouTube channel, breaks down all that stuff, from everything we did with the founding documents to to our special podcast, special reports, all that stuff. It's all there. Thank you again for everyone, as Lou said, who's been watching and contributing and signing up. This is what happens when you get 2 retired or semi-retired lawyers who love their country, who want to spread the word and the reasons why this country is so great. Grab a drink, whether it's water or anything else, pull on up and enjoy the Republic if you can keep it.
If you can keep it. This is Republic,
Lou, my
If You Can Keep It podcast, signing off. My brother Rob, here's to you.
Here's
everyone out there.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And slow rolling, Ben.
Slow,
steady, and going.
Baby hating. Later.
Shut up and sit down.
Thanks for listening to the Republic, If You Can Keep It podcast. Join Rob and Lou in our next episode as we continue our riveting discussions on the most important topics affecting our great republic. Drop a line for topics you want to discuss, and don't forget to like,
subscribe, and share. Until next time.